Hi everyone! This week we're going to be working on another spooky sketchbook spread, and I chose a movie that might not be on everyone's traditional Halloween movies list, but it just has this delicious, spooky aesthetic that I just love. And we're going to be working on a spread inspired by The Witch.
For starters, as usual, I had to prime the surface of the paper in my sketchbook for the left side of the spread so that the oils wouldn't seep through the fibers of the paper and potentially damage it. I have kind of established a process for priming the paper for oil painting at this point, but I want to experiment with changing the texture of the paper to try to make it less slippery. I covered the left side of the spread with 1 coat of sizing paste and 2 coats of gesso, but this time I tried to intentionally use horizontal brush strokes for the first coat and then vertical brush strokes for the second coat so that together they would create a texture that's kind of similar to a canvas weave. Oh, and I added some raw umber acrylic paint into the gesso for the second coat to tone the surface because I just don't like working with white surfaces. The sketching really came easy this time. I went into it with a certain composition in mind, which really helped guide the process. And by the way, for these sketches, I use a graphite pencil by Blackwing, which is my absolute favorite. I have like 10 of them. They're a little on the pricey side, but they're really worth it. Let me tell you, I have a thing for witches and witchy aesthetic, and it keeps making its way into my art. I think it started with me watching The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which I obsessed over for some time, and it was during that period that I watched The Witch. This movie has a beautiful cinematography and a delicious dark atmosphere, and I like that it takes its time to establish it. For someone who enjoys the horror genre, I really dislike jump scares. I want nothing more than a horror film that can build up the tension and make my skin crawl, and The Witch accomplishes it perfectly. It puts its spell on you through its subtlety in a lot of places. For example, the scenes with the twins and Black Phillip really creep me out. Did you notice the lyrics of the song that the twins were singing in it? It goes like, Black Phillip, king of sea and sand, we're your servants, we're your men. And that's why I made them Black Phillip's marionettes here, because they were clearly under his influence. Once I finished the sketches, I used a dark green ink by Sketch Ink to make it more interesting and tie the composition together, like in the last 2 sketches. Oh, and of course I had to use the iconic quote from the movie, which still rings in my mind every time I think of it. Now that the gesso on the left side of the spread has dried, we are ready to start painting. I used water mixable oils by Cobra, like the last 2 times, because they're just easier to work with inside. I'm also going to use a painting medium by Cobra, a fast dry medium by Winsor & Newton, some chalk powder, and a bit of water to thin out the paint and clean my brushes. By the way, this is how I make my palettes. I just take a board, usually from the back of a paper pad, and stick a sheet of transfer paper to it with masking tape. After I'm done, I can just throw out the transfer paper and that's it. I got a couple of comments about how and why I use the chalk with the fast dry medium with my oil paints, so I want to talk about that a little bit. I picked this trick up from Ben Valentine, an amazing artist whom I greatly admire and study from using his courses. What he does is mix chalk with alkyd and add it in a 50-50 proportion to his titanium white paint. It makes the white paint a little less opaque and more tacky and speeds up the drying time. And in this case, I used a water mixable fast dry medium to make sure that it works well with my oils instead of an alkyd. And I added a bit of it to my other colors as well, so this painting dries really fast, and also in an effort to change its consistency, which I'll talk more about later. I usually start by thinning out my raw umber paint and using a medium flat brush to literally draw out my sketch and establish some of the main values. After that, I usually don't have much of a plan, but I try to start with the darker areas and gradually work into the highlights. It's easier to work that way because titanium white is probably going to be the strongest pigment on your palette, so it will be more difficult to try to overpower it later on. One problem I have with painting on paper, like I mentioned, is that the surface is very slippery, meaning that I usually keep disturbing and lifting the paint underneath when I try to paint in layers. That doesn't usually happen when I paint on canvas or paper that's specifically made for oil painting, so I'm trying to experiment to see how I can change that. That's why I added the chalk formula into all of my paints this time to see how it would lay on paper. And it actually worked a lot better in that regard, but it dragged so much that I actually had to keep adding a medium to make it flow a bit more, which I guess partially defeated the purpose. One thing I liked about working on the spread was that I was able to focus on the portrait without trying to pack too many tiny details on such a small scale, which is how I guess I chose my subject. I particularly enjoyed working on the hair, and I really liked the texture that I was able to achieve here.
And here it is. I don't know if the oil portrait actually has a lot of resemblance to Anya Taylor-Joy, but I really like the textures in it, especially in the hair. And they're there because the oil paint was so thick, because of the fast dry medium that I mixed together with chalk and added to all of my colors. It was a little bit more complicated to work with, but I think it was worth it. And I also like the sketches on the right side. I think that the composition works really well, and these are turning out to be an amazing exercise aside from being a lot of fun for me. And let me know what you think. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to this channel for more art shenanigans. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!